Politics Matters. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Welcome to Politics Matters, a weekly show where we bring different politicians into your homes and talk about issues that matter to you. The objective is to encourage you to engage with political life here in Britain. Today we're delighted to have with us Baroness Shaz Sheehan, who is a peer representing the Liberal Democrats. And we're going to ask her a series of questions about how she got into politics and her personal experience. Shaz, just to begin with, you became a member of the House of Lords following the last general election in 2015. But before that, you were a cabinet minister in local government in Richmond. But how did you really get into politics? And perhaps you could then expand that out to your experience in politics.
Just to say hello to your listeners. My entrance into politics was really by accident. I had never thought of politics as a career. I was always very, very interested in current affairs and what was happening not just in the world around me but in my community. And I had throughout my younger life been a Labour voter, in fact, but I was very, very angry with Tony Blair when he took us into the Iraq War, which I thought was an illegal action. And I got in contact with some of the local political parties and found out a little bit about them. The Liberal Democrats were the party who were extremely active locally, and when I learned more about them, they represented my principles, my values, my beliefs, and so I volunteered to do some work for them, and I delivered leaflets and knocked on doors, worked in the general election campaign, and then I was asked if I wanted a job with Susan Kramer when she was elected MP for Richmond Park. And that was really the way it happened for me.
Just to draw a parallel, because I interviewed Lord Hussain, who's also a Liberal Democrat peer, and this was for me a first, because he resigned from the Labour Party in the day of the Iraq War.
Yes.
You know, on a matter of principle.
Absolutely.
And was then approached locally by the Liberal Democrats, and he obviously joined the Liberal Democrats and is a Liberal Democrat peer. And I was contrasting that with what you often hear about, if I can term them, people from the Indian subcontinent often switch parties, not on principles, but because they didn't get, as they say in Punjabi, didn't get a ticket, didn't get to stand for them. So I just thought it was really interesting, and it's strange how that same issue actually meant that you joined the Liberal Democrats. Could I ask a different question, which is about, we try and encourage people to enter politics. And often in politics, whether you stand in local elections, whether you stand in as an MP or the European elections, often you end up losing at some point in time. And that can be part of your building your experience of how you campaign. I know you've stood as a prospective parliamentary candidate for the Liberal Democrats. How was that experience?
I think that's a really interesting question, because the Liberal Democrats, as you know, at the moment we don't have very many MPs. We did have 57 before, which again wasn't a very high number of MPs. So I think if you join the Liberal Democrats, you're doing it because you utterly identify with the work of that the party does. So when I stood as a parliamentary candidate in Wimbledon, it was with the knowledge that there weren't any safe seats that I could easily go for.
It's a very conservative seat.
I had to grow my own seat. And I thought, looking at Wimbledon, looking at the demographics within Wimbledon, looking at the seats around the Wimbledon constituency, where we've got Sutton and Cheam, which was a Liberal Democrat seat, Ed Davey in Kingston and Surbiton, a Liberal Democrat seat, Vince Cable in Twickenham, not far away, a Liberal Democrat seat, and of course Richmond Park and North Kingston was a Liberal Democrat seat. So I thought that, to me, a candidate prepared to put the work and the effort into Wimbledon could make it a Liberal Democrat seat. I saw no reason why. So I did stand in it, not just once, but twice. And sadly, the fact that we're in coalition with the Conservatives meant that we suffered a severe defeat in 2015. But if I hadn't been elected, hadn't been nominated to the House of Lords by Nick Clegg in 2015, I would still be fighting to win Wimbledon for the Liberal Democrats.
What would be, Shaz, your message to viewers out there, people thinking about entering politics, about, you know, sometimes you're in it not to win, but to actually just take part?
Absolutely. I mean, and I will speak directly to camera. What I'd like to say to people is that it is so important that Parliament is representative of everybody in the UK. And I think all communities really need to take part and make sure that their voice is heard and their issues are in front of politicians. And the way to do that is have a look at the local parties around you and see which one you identify with, which party you think best reflects your values and principles, and just join them and try and get involved at a local level.
Shaz, I'm going to address the camera also just to talk about women in politics, because I think this is really important. So if you literally go back 100 years, 1918 was the first time that women got a vote in this country. And I think that was the same year that the first woman MP was actually elected from, I think, Sinn Féin, but didn't take up their post. And it was a year later when we had the first woman MP in Parliament. And it was then, almost 10 years later, in 1928, when men and women had the right to vote at the age of 21. So it's been 90 odd years, less than 90 years ago, since women got the right to vote. Before that, in 1918, you had to be over 30 years of age. Let's fast track that forward to now. You know, 29% of all MPs are women, and a slightly smaller percentage, 24% of all Lords are women. Do you think that's good enough?
In 2017, no, quite frankly, it's not good enough. And I think one of the reasons why women are still finding it a challenge to enter politics is that they are still having to overcome the barriers. They are still the principal person in the home who has responsibility for the house and making sure everything works there, but also for the children, and once the children are older, for taking care of the elderly. It's still very much a huge barrier, I think, for women. And I think another barrier really is the very machismo culture in the Houses of Parliament. The thing that people see most regularly on television is Prime Minister's Questions Time, and they see a room full of rowdy schoolboys, often is what it sounds like, very aggressive. It's not an atmosphere that I think many women will think, oh, I'd like to be a part of that. Yeah. So we need to change that culture.
So I think, again, saying to viewers, 29% of women are MPs. We need that percentage to be much higher. It should reflect the population.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I think even the situation in different political parties, I think the Green Party have one MP and that's a woman, so they're 100%. But obviously that's a very small party. So I think this is something for all the political parties to address. You had three children yourself. How did you find bringing up three children and having an active political career? How difficult was that?
It's extremely difficult because, you know, you're very, as a mother, you're very, very committed to the family and making sure that you spend as much time as possible with them, and you make sure that they don't suffer because you're doing things often in the evenings or at weekends. And so it's a question of managing your time as well as you can. But it is absolutely doable if you explain to them. And the other thing that's absolutely crucial for me was having support from my husband, who understood. There were times when he would have to step in, and I have to say I also had help around the house. You know, I couldn't have done it without someone to help me with the housework and with the shopping and with the cooking. Yeah,
Shaz, just one final question on this issue of women representation. We had Margaret Thatcher, a very strong Prime Minister, who was a woman. We've now got Theresa May, the Home Secretary is a woman, the Secretary of State for Education is a woman, and there are many other ministers that are women. But do you think in our lifetime we are likely to see Parliament has fair representation for women?
I don't know whether we'll see it in our lifetimes, but I think women's attitude towards politics are changing. These role models are crucial, absolutely crucial for young girls going through school to realise that this is a career that's open to them, and it is a career where their ambition cannot stop. There are no barriers to their ambition because they can see that not just one Prime Minister, but two Prime Ministers in Britain have been women.
Shaz, earlier you mentioned that currently there are 8 Liberal Democrat MPs, and
there are currently 9.
9, sorry, there was one recently.
Sarah Olney is now our MP Richmond Park in North Kingston.
In terms of the Sikh community, because many viewers of KTV are from the Sikh community, is when you have a very small party with a small number of MPs, they need to be spread very thinly. They've got to do their constituency work as well as represent the party. Has the Liberal Democrat Party thought about how it deals with so many issues with so few MPs?
Absolutely, and the way that we manage the lack of MPs is that the Liberal Democrat peers in the House of Lords do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of the scrutiny of legislation that comes before before Parliament. We will do a lot of that. We will visit local parties and we will speak at events on behalf of MPs, and we will certainly do whatever we can to make sure that they can function both in their constituencies and in their roles in Westminster.
Just we've talked about the lack of enough women in Parliament. I'm now going to focus on the Sikh community because this is a big issue in the community, that we have no MPs at the moment in the House of Commons. We have 3 members of the House of Lords. One's a crossbencher and the other 2 are Conservative Lords. If I was to look at other communities, you take the Jewish community has around 50 MPs and Lords, and their population is about 1/3 of the Sikh population. The first Sikh that came here 170 years ago. So it's not that Sikhs have not been in this country. I think a recent survey showed 69% are born here now. So a very large proportion are born and bred up here. The Liberal Democrats have 100 peers. Do you think we will see a Sikh Liberal Democrat peer in the near future, given there are 100?
Yes, I think so, but it really also comes down to the Sikh community getting involved within Liberal Democrat politics. We are a very democratic party. Any member can come and join us. Any member can come to our conferences where we make policy. Before we decide on a policy, the motion will be debated at conference. People can put in a speaker's card. It would be absolutely fantastic to have representatives from the Sikh community asking to speak at conference, giving their views on motions. And that's what it's when you become a member of Parliament or when you become a candidate, you need to look at 2 things: is the seat winnable or not, and you want to be going for a winnable seat, which means that you will be in a very competitive selection for that seat as a candidate. So you need to, as well as thinking, how can I, what work do I need to do as a candidate in that seat, you need to figure out how you're going to win the selection for that seat as well. And I think the way to do it is to get involved in the party, get to know the local members who are going to be voting for the selection, and make yourself a candidate to whom they cannot say no. And it is absolutely 100% possible.
What I was going to say, Shaz, is I think becoming an MP is a bigger challenge in the sense that you have to go through that selection process. You have to be the right candidate that members vote for. But I think what we'll be doing in the coming months when we interview the party leaders is what we're saying. When it comes to the House of Lords, that's very much a decision for the parties. And therefore, we'll be saying, look, if we just take the population as a whole, there should probably be at least 7 or 8 Sikh Lords. There are currently 3. And if you take someone like Parmjit Singh Gill, who became the first Sikh Liberal Democrat MP from Leicester South, people can do it, and that we want to show those role models. So I think this is a challenge for both the community, but also the different political parties. It's not so much focused on the Liberal Democrats. I think the Labour Party actually has a bigger challenge because it has no Sikh Lords, no MPs, and in fact, traditionally, a lot of Sikhs have supported the Labour Party.
Absolutely, and I think that is a question for them to answer. My own route into the Lords was, first of all, it came as a complete shock and a surprise when I received the phone call from Nick Clegg offering me a peerage. And so my objective in getting involved in politics was really very much to try and make a difference to my local community, and hopefully in time win a seat in Parliament and make a difference as an MP. Having worked for Susan Kramer and as her head of office for several years when she was MP in Richmond Park, I know the difference that a good constituency MP can make to the daily lives of their constituents, and that was my aim. So I think when you get involved in politics, you have to be doing it for the right reasons, and you have to be aware that often nobody's going to thank you. And so it is, I think, quite a difficult life, but once I started on it and got involved in politics, I was totally addicted.
Could I, last few questions around the House of Lords itself. We often hear of the need for reform. Sometimes people talk about introducing age limits, as you have for bishops, for judges, etc. There's also, more recently, the whole issue of Brexit, and the Liberal Democrats in particular took a stance in the House of Lords. Do you think that's enhanced the image of the House of Lords, or do you think it's brought the need for an elected second chamber closer?
Well, it's such an interesting question, isn't it? The role of the House of Lords. In recent years, it's been the House of Lords that has stopped excesses, shall we say, of some of the wishes of the House of Commons. We stopped the changes to tax credits, which would have meant the poorest people in society paying even more, and we thought that was right. And more recently, you've seen that the Liberal Democrats have led the attack against the hard Brexit that this Conservative government wants to bring in. And we absolutely believe that this was, although people voted to leave the EU, they did not vote to leave the single market. They did not vote to kick out EU citizens living here and for our citizens in Europe to lose their rights. And so you're absolutely right. Our main points in the stance that we took was that we need democracy when the deal is done. When Theresa May brings the deal back to us, we want the people to have the final say on the deal. And it does show what the House of Lords can achieve when necessary.
Just my final question, which is about an elected second chamber. Do you think an elected second chamber would actually be a step backwards for groups that are underrepresented, women, minorities?
I think the appointed chamber, as it currently is, appointed by the politicians, may not be the right, is not the right image, if you like, for the House of Lords, but whether it's elected or appointed by a committee or a different committee, and whether there are quotas for the number of women or ethnicities, etc., is something that I think really needs to be looked at very, very carefully, and hopefully there'll be some working parties looking at that. I'm not sure about the age limit. Maybe a time limit might be better, 15 years, 20 years. Often people mature into the role. It's when you know the processes and the issues that you can that you can contribute even more.
Shaz, it's been a delight interviewing you. As a community, we look forward to working with the Liberal Democrats, whether it be in the Commons or the House of Lords. For those of you at home, again, the whole point about Politics Matters is to talk about issues that matter to you all across the full range of subjects, not just as a Sikh community or a Muslim community or a Hindu community, but issues like education, health, and issues like Brexit, which do matter to you all. Politics Matters, we bring it to you every week. We'll try and bring a different politician to you every week. Keep watching KTV and supporting KTV. Waheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Waheguru Ji Ki Fateh. Politics Matters.